Dustin Nosler. He writes for Dodgers Digest. He can also be heard on his weekly podcast, Dugout Blues. Download it today and subscribe to it on iTunes. Dustin, how are things going for you tonight?
Oh, pretty well. Just really getting geared up for tomorrow for the first pitch of the season.
Like we were saying a moment ago, we can't believe it. It was a very quick offseason, although in the Dodgers' case, it's probably a good thing, considering how things went last fall. You want to get back out there as soon as possible. They came out roaring in spring training. A couple different players did. We saw some good performances overall. There's obviously some question marks, too, as we head into opening day. Just your overall assessment of how things went this spring for the Dodgers.
Yeah, the short offseason is going to happen when you play into November, which is what they did. Unfortunately, like you said, it didn't in the way Dodger fans and the organization had hoped. But, it did kind of sneak up on you, and the season seems to be starting a little bit earlier. So, they're in pretty good shape. Every team has question marks, especially at the beginning of the season, and the Dodgers are no exception, but they still have one of the deepest teams, if not the deepest team in baseball, and they're well equipped to handle anything that comes up, including, say, their best hitter breaking their wrist in a late month spring training game.
You bring up Turner, so we'll go right into it. At the moment, obviously, he's going to be out probably into at least May. They're going to move Forsythe over to third, obviously. Is that enough to make up for his injury and his absence in the lineup, to at least to kick off the year?
It's going to be hard to make up fully for his injury because he's probably the best overall hitter on the team. But Logan Forsythe is a capable defender at third base. It might even be his best defensive position. I think he's better than the player we saw last season. He's not going to step in and hit like Turner has hit in the last few years, but he'll be good enough, and whoever they plug in at second, be it Enrique Hernandez, Chase Utley, maybe a little Austin Barnes, they'll be able to sustain the loss of Turner for a couple of months.
Is there a sense of concern around the team and organization, Dustin, that maybe there could be somewhat of a, the team could be lagging a bit going into the year, coming off of the World Series loss last year? Perhaps there's some fatigue around the team. Is there any concerns about that at all going into the season?
I don't think so. It's a pretty veteran group. They all get along really well. If you saw during last season, they seem to have some of the best chemistry. That not that can really be measured, but you always got to watch out for a little lull. But they didn't start off on fire last season, and then they hit their stride in about mid-May, and then they just took off from there. So I could see something similar happening this season.
We're chatting with Dustin Nosler from Dodgers Digest. Also check out his podcast, Dugout Blues, on iTunes. Dustin, is Kenta Maeda, is he ready to move back into the rotation? We know Kershaw is going to start once again tomorrow on opening day against the Giants for this team. There is some concerns about the rotation. We can get into that in just a moment, but specifically for Maeda, obviously he pitched in relief last year towards the end of the season, did pretty good, I may add, coming out of the bullpen. Roberts has elected to put him back in the rotation. Is he ready to go?
Oh, yeah, I think he's ready to go. He's still, right now, he's more valuable as a starting pitcher than he is a relief pitcher. He still struggles against left-handed pitching, so if you have him in the bullpen, he's kind of limited to just mainly facing righties. It was just what he did late last season and into the postseason. But he still misses a lot of bats, and, he's a quality starting pitcher. He's probably the most underrated, maybe the most underrated player on the entire team.
Hey, Dustin, I got a question for you. With, of course, this is early, and, they kick off the season tomorrow, but what approach do the Dodgers go with this year? Last year they emphasized defense a lot, and that's kind of got them over the hump into the World Series. But this year, do they go into the season with a more of an offensive approach, or do they go back with the same thing with the defensive approach, and they think that's going to actually get them back to the World Series and possibly win it?
Yeah, I mean, they brought in Matt Kemp. I don't think anybody really expected him to still be around. So they're not really emphasizing defense in that regard. But I think before the season's all said and done, they'll still be a really strong defensive team. And they on paper, they look like one of the stronger offensive teams, especially if everybody's healthy. And that's always a big question mark. You're getting Andrew Tolles back at some point. He's going to go start in AAA. But if Jock Peterson struggles or any of the other outfielders struggle, he'll probably be one of the first guys up.
You mentioned Kemp. Let's talk about him. He's back with the Dodgers for the first time since 2014, Dustin. He was acquired in December, of course, from Atlanta via that salary dump that included Adrian Gonzalez, Charlie Culberson, and others. He's looked good this spring, to say it bluntly. He has looked really good. He has surprised a lot of people. He's going to start in left field tomorrow. Roberts is going to put him out there. What can we realistically expect for Matt Kemp this season? Can he hit 30 home runs? He's 33. Is that possible?
I mean, he's got it in him. Obviously, he could hit that many. The big question is he going to get enough opportunities to do that? I don't think the Dodgers will be able to sustain having him out there the whole time as a full-time starter because his defense is just not good. I know he's lost the weight and he looks like he's moving a little better, but even when he was prime Matt Kemp, he wasn't a premium defender. So, I mean, if he gets 600 plate appearances, he could hit 30 plus home runs, but I'm not sure he's going to get that many plate appearances. What you're hoping for is just to maximize the value, whatever value he has. If it's for a month, it's for 2 months, for half the season. You just want to get as much as you can out of him, and just maybe make him more of a part-time player, which might actually make him a little more valuable.
Is it possible they brought him in to be a potential trade chip?
He'd have to really hit well. I mean, they tried to, since they acquired him or reacquired him, they tried to trade him. Obviously, they couldn't find any takers. They couldn't find any acceptable deals for them, which is kind of saying something because I don't think they were terribly attached to him. But he's owed a lot of money over the next 2 years, and they're not going to just get rid of him before seeing if they can extract any value out of him. If there is a trade to be made, it'll probably be with an American League team if he hits pretty well for a couple of months.
So back to the rotation now. We talked before about Maeda. You feel confident about him that he can slide right back in there and be productive for Dave Roberts in that five-man rotation. Is there enough depth, though, with Maeda behind Kershaw, Alex Wood, Rich Hill, obviously? Is there enough in there to sustain the loss of some of the guys that they've lost in recent years who've gone on to other teams? Is there enough there?
Yeah, it's not they're not as deep in the rotation as they were, say, even last season. But they've got Walker Buehler on the farm. He's their top prospect. He's a top 20 prospect in the game. His stuff is lights out. He just needs to work on his control command and becoming a little more consistent. Hyun-Jin Ryu is a perfectly capable fifth starter. He'll probably get bumped when they make a midseason acquisition for a starter, which they've done the last 3 seasons, and I wouldn't expect that to change this year if the opportunity presents itself. They've also got a guy like Brock Stewart in the minors who might end up being better in a relief role, but he could be a spot starter for you for a handful of games if you need him. They'll look to add at the deadline, though, for sure, because they'll need another at least mid-rotation guy come October, especially if they're going to end up moving Kenta Maeda back to the bullpen.
Talking with Dustin Nosler here on Behind the Mic, joining us from Dodgers Digest. Kershaw, one of the big things with him last year was he was getting too many innings. People were concerned. Is there a short leash on him here in 2018? Obviously, they're going to go out there. They're going to let him do his thing. He's one of the best pitchers in baseball. Obviously, he's been one of the best players on this team in general now for quite some time. But is there concern that he could be overpitched again here in 2018?
I don't know. I mean, the biggest issue is his back. If his back holds up, they're going to let him throw 200-plus innings. But he hasn't hit that mark the last couple of seasons. So, it all depends on the health of his back. If he's 100% healthy or as close to 100% as he can be, they're just going to let him go because he is the best pitcher in baseball. But if he's, acting up, if his back is acting up, then they might kind of pull back a little bit. They might, utilize that 10-day DL to get him a little built-in rest. It's something that he would really hate, but it might be beneficial in the long run. Because we saw in the postseason he was kind of up and down. Like, he was good for a few games. He was not so good for a couple of games. So if they can get some rest built in kind of artificially throughout the season, that might end up helping him in the long run, even if that's not what he wants to do.
Dustin, Yasiel Puig, what can we expect from him this year? I heard he had a good spring training. What can we expect from him this year? What do you think?
I mean, the sky's the limit for him. He's one of the most talented players on the team. Last season was a really nice year for him. It was, it wasn't like his first two seasons when he burst onto the scene and was the talk of the town. But he was a very productive player last season. He's a premium defender in right field, so you don't have to worry about his defense. I could see him taking that next step and getting back to maybe closer to the level he was back in 2013 to 2014, rather than what he was in, say, 15 and 16. He might. I mean, if it all comes together, he can anchor your lineup. He could be your number 3 hitter.
I think one of the biggest question marks about this team heading into the season, Dustin, is how do they replace Brandon Morrow in the setup position out of the bullpen? Obviously, he signs in the offseason with Chicago. What do they do when it comes to that moment, the setup position comes along in the 8th inning? How do they replace him?
Yeah, I mean, Morrow was a revelation last season. I mean, he didn't look great in spring training. His numbers in AAA weren't great, but he came up and he was lights out. They're going to have to try to replace that production somehow. I mean, they're not going to be able to replace it 1-to-1, most likely, but they did acquire a lefty in Scott Alexander from the Royals, who some have called a lighter version of Zach Britton, the Orioles closer. They've also got Josh Fields, who he's kind of inconsistent, but he's got the stuff to be a late inning reliever. Pedro Baez is an enigma. I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan of him, so I'm not counting on too much. They claimed a guy off of waivers from the Twins in February named JT Chagua, and he looked really good in spring training. He's got an electric arm, but he's also got an injury history. So, they might be able to cobble something together from those guys, or maybe they'll look to add a late inning reliever come the trade deadline.
Dustin, does everybody? Let me ask you this, because this was just something going on. We had a little mishap on the field the other day with the pipe bursting and everything like that.
Last night.
What's the status on that right now?
Yeah, that was crappy. They sent out an email today, a PR email, just saying they've identified the issue. They think it's all taken care of. They're not worried about it anymore. But Dodger Stadium's really old, and things like that are bound to happen sometimes. It sounds like they've got it all fixed ahead of opening day, so it shouldn't be an issue anymore.
Okay.
Well, it can't be any worse than what they went through at Wrigley Field a few years ago with the renovations to the stadium and the bathroom situation. The restrooms were in high demand, and things they had to kind of detour people, sort of say. So it can't be any worse than what they went through there. Hopefully everything is ready to go for tomorrow.
Yeah, and what happened in Oakland, I think it was last year or the year before, they've had that same kind of situation with the plumbing. So, I mean,
yes,
some of these stadiums are a little old, but they need to, they're more than willing to fix them and make sure everything's all right.
That's what we love about the game, though, is some of these historic ballparks, like a Dodger Stadium, like a Wrigley Field, a Fenway Park. Mm-hmm. It keeps the richness of the sport alive. I don't think there's any question about that. Talking about the lineup, Dustin, for starters, Chase Utley, he comes back on a 2-year deal, the veteran. He can still contribute, we assume, here and there. Were you surprised they brought him back?
No, everybody on the team in the organization loves him. They didn't bring him back to be a starting second baseman. They didn't bring him back to even play as much as he did last season. They brought him back to be the guy in the clubhouse. He's the clubhouse dad. And, if everybody wants him back and they can fit him onto the roster, and he can still play, and you know what, he could probably still play a little bit. He's not going to be like he was in his prime. He's not going to be anything close to that, but he could still be a somewhat positive presence on the team, probably more off the field than on the field.
I think Dodger fans want to hear more of that, sort of say, where they have this leader in the clubhouse, maybe not necessarily producing on the field like he did, like you had mentioned there in his prime, Dustin, but to have that figure, I think Dodger fans want to hear that. They also want to hear how good this team is going to be as far as from a youth perspective, guys like Cody Bellinger, Corey Seager. How excited should Dodger fans be about these guys? I mean, Cody Bellinger, this is going to be really his first full season, starting at first base with Adrian Gonzalez now out the door. It's a young core, as we know, and I think once fans take a step back, and most have at this point from the World Series loss last year, it's a young, talented core, and that's going to be the strength of this team.
Yeah, they've got, like you said, a young core mixed with a good group of veterans, too. And, I think they've got a really good balance here, and fans should absolutely be excited for Cody Bellinger and Corey Seager. They're premium prospects. They were homegrown, and they could end up being the best at their positions, respectively. Maybe even as early as this season. I
was going to say, both of them could be starting in the All-Star game, perhaps.
Oh yeah, if they get enough votes. It's a popularity contest, but Bellinger's got 40-plus home run potential. We saw he hit 39 last season. Corey Seager's got MVP level potential, and so does Bellinger. These are two cornerstones for your franchise. These are guys you build around. This is why they didn't trade them for rental pitchers or other guys at the trade deadline in years past, because the organization obviously saw that these guys are the core or future core of the team.
Dustin, finish this statement. The best team in baseball heading into the season is?
Yes.
My heart wants to say the Dodgers, but
Dustin,
I know
ahead and say it, Dustin. Just go ahead and
even with Turner healthy, they're probably maybe not the number one team right now. So I'll just I'm going to say, as much as it hurts to say, I'm going to say the Astros.
Oh,
I agree.
Astros.
I think
I'm shocked.
I don't think there's going to be a hangover at all, to be honest. I really don't. I think they're going to come flying out of the gates. I really do. I think they're so young, and they're going to get a full year of Verlander, obviously. They got Keuchel back as well in the rotation. They're just dominant in all phases of the game. I think they're going to be hungrier than ever.
Man, I don't know about that. Like, for me, you know what? I'm surprised. I'm shocked because I thought he was going to say the Yankees.
They're close.
They're close.
I almost did. I
thought you were going to say the Yankees, especially with the batting lineup they have. But, I think Houston Astros, look, they're an offensive threat team. They can put that. They can put the bat on the ball. And I don't know. I think it's very hard to get back to that stature. I think it's going to be tough, but we'll see. I thought it was going to be, like I said, I thought it was going to be the Yankees. You guys are going to say, but the Astros may shock me again. I don't know.
They're both really talented teams. They're easily the two best teams in the AL. The only thing that I would ding the Yankees for is their rotation, but their bullpen's better than Houston, so you can kind of even it out there. But the Astros had an historically great lineup last season, and they didn't lose anybody. So it's a coin flip. If you wanted to argue the Yankees, I wouldn't put up much of a fight. I think when it's all said and done, though, it'll be Yankees or Astros in the World Series being represented by the American League.
No question. Those are the two top dogs in the AL. Most people aren't going to argue that. Out west, though, here, Dustin, the Dodgers, is there competition now in the NL West? Which team maybe is the closest to challenging them this year? Is it the Giants, perhaps, with a bit of a revamped look?
I'm not. I live in Northern California, and so I hear it all the time, but I don't see it. I don't see it with the Giants, even if they had a healthy Bumgarner and a healthy Samardzija. I just don't see them being able to put all that together to challenge the Dodgers. The Dodgers are the class of the division. And then you've got the Rockies and Diamondbacks, who I think are better than the Giants right now. So it'd be one of those two teams, and I'm a little concerned about the Diamondbacks. They don't have the depth, whereas the Rockies seem like they do have a little more depth than the Diamondbacks. So if any team's going to challenge the Dodgers in the division, it'd probably be the Rockies.
Dustin Nosler, once again, he is a contributor for Dodgers Digest. Also check out his weekly podcast, Dugout Blues, on iTunes. The Dodgers, presumably, they should get back to the World Series. The key word there is should. What is something that is going to prevent them from basically running the table in the National League once again and getting back to the Fall Classic?
You could go the easy route and say health, because it's always health with any team that makes the World Series. Or wins the World Series. I'll say, if you don't want me to go with health, I'll go with the star power on the other two teams in the NL, the other two contending teams, be it the Nationals and the Cubs. They're really top heavy, both of those teams, and I could see them giving the Dodgers a run for the money.
There we go. He's got the pulse of everything Dodgers related. Last question for you, Dustin. What is your excitement level for Shohei Ohtani? He's with the Angels, obviously. He chose them over the Dodgers. Kershaw doesn't want to hear anything about him, right? Because he chose the Angels over the Dodgers, so he's done answering any questions about him being in L.A. But he is in L.A. He's in California here, obviously. I think the big thing is that, he's young, so obviously he's different than these other guys who've come over from the Asian countries in previous years.
I'm really excited for his potential. I'm not sure the whole two-way thing is going to work out in the long run, but if anybody's going to be able to make it work, it's going to be him. But he's no doubt on the mound. He's lights out on the mound. I know he didn't have a great spring training, but you can chalk that up to being an adjustment period. I mean, he might not even have a great season. He might not even win Rookie of the Year, but I think, in a couple of years he'll be a household name on the mound at least. And if he can give you any kind of production at the plate, then that's just a bonus.
Follow him on Twitter at Dustin Nosler. Opening day, less than 24 hours away, Dustin. Enjoy the season. We appreciated your time here tonight on Behind the Mic, and we look forward to your weekly podcast on Dugout Blues and reading your articles in Dodgers Digest. Keep up the great work.
Awesome, guys. Thanks so much.